economic growth and jobs. These are the DA's key priorities, and now they form part of the national government agenda. Mzansi Africa, molweni, sanbonani, goeiemorgen, and good morning. My name is Luyolo Mpeti, and today is a significant day for all South Africans as we come together to unpack the medium-term budget policy statement delivered yesterday by the Minister of Finance. This marks the first time the DA has shaped the national budget priorities as part of the national government, and it is a monumental step in steering the country towards a better future. The policies we've championed are finally taking root, demonstrating how your support for the DA translates into real wins for every South African. Now, if you're watching at home, remember to like and share this broadcast with your friends and family, and let us know what you think in the comment section. Joining me today in studio, we have Willie Okamp, the DA National Spokesperson, Bridget Masango, the DA Spokesperson on Social Development, Dr. Mark Burke, the DA Spokesperson on Appropriations, and Bakolile Notata, the DA Deputy Chief Whip. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Great to have you here in studio. As you can see, I'm wearing a green suit symbolizing money, money, money. That's what we're talking about here today. But I think for many people at home, Mark, they are asking themselves, what is the medium-term policy statement? What is it all about? How does it affect them? Can you just tell us briefly what this is?
Well, it excites me. And it excites me as a member of the DA because it's the first time that we are in government and we are influencing the budget. But the word budget sounds a bit boring, doesn't it? And so perhaps a good way of thinking about what happened yesterday and what will be happening over the next 3 years is it's that family meeting. It's into a new year. We maybe spent a bit more than we should have. Dad is maybe or maybe not a bit hungover. And we now need to sit down and say, how much money is coming into this household? And how much do we need to spend? And how do I prioritize that spending? What do we spend on education for the kids? What do we spend on healthcare? And what do we spend on safety and so on? And all of these things combined for a country of 60 million people is very important to get right. So that's what the midterm budget is all about.
Well, there's been a lot of talk about this is the first medium-term budget statement where the DA has had significant inroads and inputs into this particular medium-term budget. So, I don't know, can you tell us what exactly is these significant gains that we've had on this particular budget?
Look, I think you'll find that this budget is more about people and less about government spending money where it shouldn't go. And I think for the first time, South Africans, have a party in government that is fighting for them. We went to them and said, we want to rescue South Africa. And part of rescuing South Africa is to make sure that the money that government collects from the citizens through tax is utilized to make sure that we give South Africans a better life. Do they have better roads tomorrow? Do they have better schools tomorrow? Do they have good hospitals that they can go to? And does this budget respond to the growing crisis of the cost of living? Do you prioritize what South Africans need to put food on the table? And for the first time in government, the DA has advanced those policies that put people first rather than bailing out SOEs.
Luyolo, it was very clear that we now have got a Democratic Alliance Deputy Minister of Finance at the table where the decisions were made. It was the first time in my life that I sat in Parliament watching an ANC Minister of Finance delivering a budget speech, and the first people to give him a standing ovation was the DA. Because of the amount of DA policies that we saw that was implemented and incorporated into his speech. So it is clear that we, forming part of the Government of National Unity, aren't only about positions, it is about what we can bring to the table. And yesterday was a very clear sign of that. And I want to thank Deputy Minister Asher Sarupan, who is the Deputy Minister of Finance, for the immense amount of hard work that he did behind the scenes. It's not sexy to do that work behind the scenes, and a lot of people don't know about that. But I can promise you, Luyolo, he did an immense lot of work behind the scenes to get this medium-term budget policy statement where it was yesterday.
And just to add to Willie, the Deputy Minister is in fact, as we speak in London, speaking to the bond market to attract investment into South Africa, which will allow us to keep growing our economy. And stepping into politics from the outside for the first time in this term, I'm personally super excited to see the DA in the room where it happened. We are
Yes.
actively participating in the conversation that guides our economy back towards growth and creating the opportunities that we need for the massive amount of unemployed people sitting at home hoping for an opportunity.
Yes.
Ma'am Bridget?
Well, it was a surreal moment yesterday to actually listen attentively to a budget speech that your party, the Democratic Alliance, has been part of putting together. I mean, it brought so much hope, even for the people that have been hearing us on the sidelines saying, no, this is what must happen. These are the solutions. For them to now hear that those solutions are actually part of what government is doing.
And just to stay on that, Ma'am Bridget, Mark, I want to bring you in here. What are these inputs exactly? Can you just list them and explain exactly what we have achieved as the DA in this medium-term budget?
Absolutely. I'd say 4 of the headlines is that we're now focusing on investment in infrastructure, which is really important because in the short term, that creates jobs when we invest in the infrastructure to build it out. But in the long term, it creates opportunity because our industry becomes more efficient as a result of good infrastructure.
Right.
Secondly, we've got finally a strategy for dealing for our overwhelming amount of national debt, which we'll speak to a bit later. Thirdly, we've got bailouts that are stopping finally, so state-owned enterprises won't bleed our national treasury of hard-earned tax money. And then finally, we are settling the e-toll bill. Now, this might seem like a detailed point, but the fact is, us settling the e-toll bill is a signal that there will be no more taxes for South Africans who can't afford it. So bringing all of that together, really it's the vibe of the thing here.
Yeah.
Finally, we are focusing on infrastructure investment as opposed to just consumption spending from the National Treasury. This is probably the most exciting thing coming out of this whole budget.
Yeah.
Now, Vili, it's quite significant that for the very first time, state-owned entities are not receiving bailouts.
Yeah.
Leolo, that's one thing that the Democratic Alliance have long been asking for. We saw over many years the hundreds of billions of rands that went into poorly mismanaged, corrupt-ridden state-owned enterprises. The DA has warned that the money that you put in there will have an effect on the pockets of each and every South African.
Yeah.
We have warned that with the division of revenue, the money that provinces and municipalities get, that will become less and less the more we bail out these entities. And we are very glad that finally there has now been a red line drawn in the sand that no more bailouts will be given. These state-owned enterprises, Luyolo, must be able to survive financially on their own. It's not up to government to bail them out. If they've got sound management and sound principles that they apply, they should have been able to be very successful.
Right.
But we saw that they did not. And the fact that we then had to pay money towards them literally took money away from paying nurses, paying doctors in provincial hospitals, paying teachers in schools, paying extra policemen. So it had a huge effect on the pockets and the lives of each and every South African.
Right.
You can just imagine sitting in Bankara, north of Kuruman, still not having water in the tap that is there. The reason for that is because we've bailed out state-owned enterprises so many times. So the people of South Africa can hopefully now look to a future where no more spending will be done to those entities.
Yeah.
And where we can now, for the first time, bring in the private sector actively. The private sector should be our friend.
Yeah.
And that is one thing that came out yesterday for me. And it is one thing that the DA also have advocated for over many years, is get the private sector involved. They've got a lot of knowledge that they can bring to the table. And they can assist in turning these state-owned enterprises around so that government does not have to go and pay money towards them, but can actually receive services from them and save money that can go towards service delivery for each and every South African.
Right.
And really, this is so important because this is why it's important that the DA was on that table in this discussion to stop these bailouts that have really, really taken from the poor. And Ma'am Bridget, we know for years upon years, the poor have continued to suffer because they've not been receiving any form of money because most of the money goes to the bailouts. So can you just take us through what is that type of suffering that has happened all these years?
Well, actually, it has been such a ironically sad moment for the last years where while the money was being poured out into the SOEs, the social ills in South Africa were deepening. You were having more gender-based violence happening. You were having drug and substance abuse happening. And there was no money to actually employ more social workers to go and work with these people. And so you saw, yesterday at least, you heard a situation where there can be hope now, that the capacity, because the huge thing in the social sector at the moment is capacity. There are social workers. We're supposed to be sitting at 55,000 social workers in the social sector. We are nowhere near that. And now that we have stopped this pouring of money after bad is stopping, we can hope now that the money will be redirected to real priorities of this country. And I can't think of any more than the people that are the poor of the poorest, your older persons, your children, your people with disabilities, your war veterans, all the people that have been waiting for assistance and have not been getting proper assistance because money has been going to SOEs.
And Bex, now you also work in rural areas. As Lali, Ogogo, Nomkulu, many of them have really experienced the pain of these bailouts that have gone to SOEs. Can you maybe just talk us through about
Look,
that?
I think what the DA has done in government with this budget, especially for stopping SOEs, is to actually turn the page. We've actually now started to turn the page because we are in the business of lifting people out of poverty into opportunity. And the best way you can do that is to make sure that you put your money where your mouth is. And, you know, today we're sitting with teacher vacancies where we can't fund teachers to go teach our children in schools. We're sitting with communities that do not have water. We've got a growing population, but we've got less and less police to keep us safe. You go to these communities in terms of infrastructure, roads, and so on. You can't even drive to these communities. And if you don't have good infrastructure and roads, and so on in communities, you will not have businesses that are going to go and invest in those communities to create jobs. And it's important for us to make sure that when we do turn the page, we take that money, we put it in what Mark was talking about in terms of investing in infrastructure, and so that businesses are able to go build in those those communities that have a lot of poor South Africans in them. But also in terms of frontline services, we're able to employ more teachers, more police officers, more social workers, and ultimately create a conducive environment for business to thrive while creating jobs so that we can get economic growth. And I think that's what the DA has done in terms of, contributing to this particular budget. And turning the page, this is just the start for South Africans. And I think gradually we will obviously get to where we need to go. But I think this is this is the right direction that we need to go to.
To add to what Bex and Bridget have been saying, we are on early childhood development grants. We're spending 17 Rand a day. Yet at some of these state-owned enterprises, the CEOs are earning between 5 to 10 million Rand a year, or 20,000 Rand a day. Now, if you tell me that a CEO is worth 20,000 Rand a day, but the most vulnerable children in our society can't get 17 Rand a day, that tells me our priorities are wrong and something needs to start changing, which this budget does.
Yes. No, I just wanted to say, we were recently going on public hearings for the Older Persons Amendment Bill. And what Bakolile is talking about in terms of infrastructure in rural areas, these older persons were saying to us, we can't reach to a clinic. And the ambulances are saying, we can't get to you because the roads are that bad. So you have a situation where SOEs are being bailed out when that is actually taking away life-saving services for the majority of the people in this country. So this is great news.
Now, Mark, I want to bring this next point to you. I know a lot of motorists, particularly in Gauteng, are rejoicing because e-tolls have been scrapped. They're out, and I think that is one of the points that the DA fought for on that decision-making table.
Absolutely, and there's a couple of things built into this. As we said earlier, there's the signal here that we're not going to keep increasing taxes. But a second point to make here is that Gauteng is the economic heartbeat of South Africa. And what we shouldn't be doing is throttling growth in places where it is happening. A third point to make is e-tolls symbolizes the taxing of the poor. It's the taxi driver who's currently collecting 18 Rand per journey from a commuter will have to increase that to 20 Rand a journey. And if you say that our social relief distress grant is 350 Rand, 2 Rand per journey each way per day has a remarkable effect on poor people. So the fact that we're not taxing the poor is exactly where we should start to try and start addressing some of the issues affecting South Africa.
Really, and so e-tolls, electricity hikes, high food prices, the DA has been at the forefront of fighting to slash these prices. Can you just tell us more how this medium-term statement speaks to these issues?
We saw over many years how the daily cost of living of each and every South African just went up and up. And it was as if there's no limit. It's just skyrocketing. Inflation went through the roof. If you look at certain prices, let's take the fuel price. The Democratic Alliance have long been asking that the tax levy on the fuel price be cut significantly. We are now hearing for the first time talk of that happening. That will have a huge knock-on effect because everything has to be transported. The DA has long been asking for the expansion of the zero-rated VAT food basket. There are a lot of food items that everybody uses on a day-to-day basis that we pay VAT on, 15%. If you can scrap VAT on boned-in chicken, it's it as example, that will immediately be a saving of 15% on a lot of basic food items that a lot of South Africans can use, which immediately will have an effect on the amount of energy, literally, that we've got, our ability to work and to work harder. So we've got to, from South Africa and from the DA side, really work to get a damper on the living cost crisis that we've got. We are looking now at Eskom, due to many years of mismanagement, that are asking for increases that will be up to 44%. Now, the person in South Africa, the normal person on street, cannot afford that. So we must fight to firstly get the Eskoms of the world turned around, but also the effects of what these increases will have. And the Democratic Alliance definitely has been on the forefront of fighting to get lower prices for day-to-day products that every South African have. We must fight this cost of living crisis. If we are not going to win this fight, we are in big trouble, Leola.
And to add to that point, what the previous government did wrong was to keep increasing these taxes, whether it was VAT going from 14 to 15%, whether it was the electricity rate hikes, whether it was e-tolls. These combined taxes on the poor is almost an admission that SARS was not able to collect revenue where it should be collecting revenue. And so something we've seen coming out of this budget is SARS investing more in its capacity to collect more revenue from the folks who can afford to pay those taxes. We need to move away from taxing the poor, and the DA is so proud to be in the room that's guiding policy to not taxing the poor anymore.
Ma'am Bridget, so we want perhaps for the people sitting at home who are saying, yes, the cost of living, I feel it. It's hitting me hard at home. My children, my kids, everything is quite difficult. When and how will this medium-term budget really start to take shape for them and they see the differences?
Well, this medium-term budget policy statement is bringing hope to the people, because as it takes effect, you will find that the people that have been having food costs that are so high. I believe it's the Peter Maritzburg Economic Justice group that has said, that has estimated just the average of a household food basket at 5,000 rand.
Sure.
Now, that is a far cry from what people receive in terms of grants, and that is a far cry for even, you know, the older person's grant is capped at 2,020 rand or something like that. But we all know that granny is feeding the entire family. So if the young people can get work, as the infrastructure and investment in infrastructure takes shape and jobs can be created, you will find that there is a hope for the people that are at the moment being hardest hit by the high cost of living.
But
look, I think Mom Bridget hit the nail on the head. We have to balance two things here. A safety net for the poor in terms of social grants, but there must be affordable food, transport.
Yes.
You know, that's why we fight for the lowering fuel price, lowering the cost of living, lowering electricity tariff hikes, because a lot of South Africans, 17 million of them, are dependent on social grants.
Yes.
But balance that out with economic growth and jobs. That is the only way to get people out of poverty. And that is why we emphasize so much in the DA that let's turn the page on this and focus on these things, because the more people work, the less they depend on the social grant. But those that have a safety net actually have a bigger social grant because you've got less and less people on it. But I think the key thing that we need to always push, that we have been pushing in this budget, is economic growth and jobs, so that more and more people can work, so that they're less dependent on this, but balance that out to make sure that the cost of the day-to-day stuff, electricity, transport, and food is at a level that is, amenable and people can be able to live.
Loyola, if I just can come in here, we have long been saying that it is not the task of government to create jobs. It's the task of government to create an environment that's conducive for the private sector to create jobs. And we saw the positivity that came in when the government of national unity was formed and when the DA entered that government. We saw how markets out there looked at South Africa. All of a sudden, within a much more positive light. And I hope that the honesty in which this medium-term budget was given yesterday. The Minister of Finance came and he said, guys, we've got problems. And let's face it. And those problems are there due to 30 years of mismanagement and poor governance. But the people out there now can see that we are making a serious effort of turning that around. And I believe that will create even further investment confidence in South Africa. Hopefully we can get to a point where we can get our ratings at the rating agencies increased so that we pay less for the loans that we had made over the past. And we must obviously reduce those loans. Our debt service cost is sky high, but I'm not going to go into that very much. But I think there's a positivity that is growing, and that will obviously help with investments coming in, job creation being bettered, and growing our economy. So I think we are on the right track, and I really want to say it is definitely one of the things that we can be very proud of is the DA and the effects that we had on what was announced yesterday.
And Mark, now to shift gears a little bit, what we also heard from the Minister of Finance yesterday was government's shift to towards long-term investments. Can you just break that down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So to build on what Willie has just shared, the attractiveness of what's happened with the Government of National Unity and the DA's involvement here is that it's effectively becoming more affordable for us to invest in the long term. So in the same way that if you went to a store and you took a exploitative loan to buy a fridge and you almost pay more in the interest than you pay for the fridge itself, the same thing happens if people don't think your economy is safe to invest in. They charge you higher interest rates. And so now the interest rates are coming down and we are able to start bringing into place these infrastructure reforms. What are some of those? Well, they include the ability for the private sector to participate alongside government in developing infrastructure, but we're also democratizing the access to our infrastructure. So we'll have third-party rail operators. If you think of a miner or farmer being able to put their produce onto the national rail network to get it to the ports quicker, those things are net positive for the economy, and the economy being stronger is net positive for job creation. So we are actively now creating an environment where investment in infrastructure is easier, more affordable, and we are inviting people to participate in the infrastructure that we are investing in.
And to stay on that point, Mark, I want to go to you, Pax. We've seen the Minister of Public Works, Dean McPherson, saying that his plan is to turn South Africa into a construction site, which is very much related to what you're saying, Mark, about long-term investments.
Look, I think that's the most important part of all of this, because it's twofold. That's the two benefits to that. Number one, South Africa being turned into a construction site means there's more jobs for people to work. Because if a school is being built, a road is being built, somebody is being employed. And secondly, the partnerships that we do have with the private sector, and we've seen the Minister, Dean McPherson, signing some agreements with other countries, private sector coming on board, is that those particular companies that are coming on board, they're partnering with government to make sure that the environments and the communities that we're in are actually left in a better conditions. So that where there was no water, there is now water infrastructure. Where there was no roads, there's now road infrastructure. Good quality schools. So that environment in itself attracts more business to say, there's a community there, I can get my products to that particular community, therefore I'm going to build a business. And again, what is the net effect? Job creation, economic growth. And I think when we say South Africa must be turned into construction site, South Africans must think about the DA saying jobs, jobs, jobs.
Yes.
And more South Africans being employed, you're lifting more people out of poverty. And I think it's a good initiative that has been put in place. And we're excited to see it happen. I, in my community, already has seen it happen because the minister himself is going to come and open a bridge where there was no bridge before, where people are able to get from the other side to a clinic, to a hospital, to a school, to town, and ultimately those businesses that are interested to bring produce are able to get to those communities where they previously wouldn't get to. And I think this is very, very important.
Yep.
And people are being employed that were not employed in those communities before.
Yes.
And I think that's the key thing around turning South Africa into a construction site.
Ma'am Bridget, we as I listen to Bex, I'm thinking this is very really good news for young people because we have a huge high unemployment rate amongst young people, and part of doing investment and creating these jobs is that young people can find employment now.
Yes, and it there is a part to having a job in for a first-time job or salary earner, or for a family that has been pouring money into educating the young person. Now that person getting a job. Because the history of South Africa is that people go to school, the parents sell their cows and sheep and everything for them to go to school, and then they don't get jobs. Now, you will have a situation where that mother who has taken their child to school is now proud. And that young person has dignity that I can actually pay this back to my family through a job that I'm having. We've had recently a situation where young people have been killing their children and themselves because they can't afford to leave anymore. But then they are saying, I don't want to leave anyone with this burden, so I'll kill all my 3 children and myself so that this chapter here is closed. This medium-term budget statement has meant so much because these are the things that we've been saying throughout the country to say, guys, if you get the Democratic Alliance into government, these are the things you will get. And to see that happen in such a very brief space of time, it actually says that we are, as a country, on the right track here. And people, especially young people, can actually be sure that supporting the Democratic Alliance electorally is actually bringing, real-time benefits for them. And the one thing I wanted to latch on as well is that this thing where you meet young people, they write to you on emails and say, please, can you find a job for me and whatever, and they, without fail, each of them will say, I just want to bring dignity back to my family.
Willie, now, one of the things that the Minister of Finance kept on emphasizing yesterday was the approach of public-private partnerships and how that is really going to be pivotal to grow the economy of South Africa.
In the past, we saw that our government was antagonistic towards the public sector or the private sector. They thought it was a sickness to get them involved. And that is why it is extremely well received to now see that they are inviting the private sector. The DA has all along said that the private sector is our friends. We should take hands with them. It is the private sector that can build this economy. And if you talk about public-private partnerships and you look at what is happening at Eskom and the freight rail network, can you imagine what the private sector can bring to the table? And secondly, what can happen when the monopolies that are currently experienced, that we know that those companies have, if for all of a sudden there's competition in those markets now. Competition is a very good thing. It enhances productivity. So we are looking forward to it. But I think apart from the private sector becoming more and more involved, we are all very happy about that. We must also look at the whole of society approach. Our leader, John Steenhuisen, has on many occasions spoke about the whole of society approach. We cannot expect only a political party or a specific church or a specific cultural or community organization to get this wagon through the river here. We've got to all pull together. And there I can use the example. We talk about Bella. And John Steenhuisen had a conversation with the president about Bella, and he asked the president, please, Mr. President, also go and speak to Kali Kriel from AfriForum and Dirk Herman from Solidariteit, so that you can get their way of thinking about this as well. And that's a very good example of involving people from outside of only politics. They are community organizations. We saw in Swane, where AfriForum and our former mayor there, Silje Brink, had a deal where they assisted in cleaning up the town. That is how communities take hands. What a pity now that there's a new government, that is one of the first contracts that they are now stopping. Yeah. Why not involve everybody to work together? And I think so if you look at the whole of society approach, Liolo, and you look at the getting together of the public sector and the private sector assisting each other, these are steps that we've long been advocating for, and I hope that it will now, after the announcement by the minister, really be implemented so that we can really see the fruits of our labor.
Just to add to what Vili is saying, sometimes, the previous regime used to look at who is doing this work rather than who does it benefit. The fact of the matter is that if you bring in the private sector to partner with government to fix our post offices, it's the poor that benefit. Yes. South Africans that benefit. Yes. If you bring in the private sector to come and partner with government in making sure that we've got functional trains and a transport system that could be cheap and take South Africans from one stop to job opportunities, it's the poor that benefit. Right. If you look at the partnerships that happen in terms of infrastructure that can take place, with the private sector investing in public infrastructure, it's South Africans that benefit. And I think it's important for South Africans to understand the DA looks less as who is bringing the things on the table, but rather who is it going to benefit. Yes. Because when you get into a flight, you don't ask, what color is the pilot, what does it look like, can they fly the plane? Yes. It's as simple as that. If you're getting into a taxi, you don't ask, does the driver have a driver's license? We're going to get to the destination that we need to get to. And South Africans need to understand the stuff that we put on the table around public-private partnership is to benefit South Africans so that there's economic growth and jobs for all of them.
And there's an element of competition that Bex is touching on. If I have to travel now between Johannesburg and Cape Town, there's a plethora of flight options, and they are some of the most affordable domestic options in the world. Yes. And that's a direct result of introducing competition, regulating it, keeping it safe, but government not trying to be involved in every industry, instead facilitating industry to solve problems. So this is exactly what the DA stands for, and it's a super exciting time to have our voice heard and guide policy towards that sort of an environment.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, one of the things that the minister also spoke about was the amount of debt that South Africa has. And so one of the things that the DA has put on the table is debt reduction rules. Can you just explain that to us?
Yeah, it's never fun to open your credit card bill. But if you repeatedly don't open it, it'll keep growing. To give you an idea, 15 years ago, we were spending 1 to 2 rand out of every 100 rand on servicing our interest and our debt. That amount has now risen to 22 out of every 100 rand. And historically, before the DA came into government, every year the debt would increase too. So the servicing was really us just making interest payments and every year paying more towards the interest. So it's a real problem. We have now almost 75% of our annual gross domestic product, which is everything that's produced in the South African economy. 75% of that is government debt. Now, to try and get your head around what this means and not sound too academic, imagine all of us sitting here, everybody sitting at home, all of our industries, Toyota, FlySaf, Air, Postnet, everybody starts donating every rand that they earn into their bank account to the president to go pay off our debt. Everybody in South Africa, every industry, business, individual would have to donate every single rand for 9 months before we're able to pay off our national debt. Now, if you bring that back to the household level, that's insane. No household could survive for 9 months without any income just to pay off a bill. So we need to come up with a strategy, and the DA has now finally been involved. And I think we've introduced the political will that's been missing under the previous governments to start addressing this debt problem. Not because it's fun to pay off the credit card bill, but because if you don't do it, you can't afford your healthcare, you can't afford your education, you can't afford your security. And you need to address that debt. And that's the responsible thing to do. And the DA is proud to be a responsible adult in this conversation.
Yes.
And Vili, to come to you, how will government debt management secure public services without overburdening the taxpayer?
Our debt went out of control. I mean, it went up and up, like Mark just said. If you look at the debt to GDP ratio, 15 years ago, it stood at 28% debt to GDP ratio, whereas now it is on 75%. Now, again, I'm very happy that the minister was honest yesterday in saying it will go up to 75.5%, but from there we will turn it around. So, but can you imagine if this keeps going up and we are all of a sudden at 90 or at 100% at the ratio that it was growing, it would have been catastrophic for South Africans. And for us to get South Africa on the right track, we need to have a fiscal anchor. We must put that into legislation. There was spoken about a fiscal anchor yesterday, and we are very glad about that. But I want the DA to push for us going so far as insisting that that must become legislation so that we cannot go and borrow and borrow. Guys, it's sometimes very easy to borrow. But as we all know, it's very more difficult to pay that back. And so we've got to have this fiscal anchor so that we do not borrow too much, but that we get at a point where we pay back our debt. Because the moment that we start paying back our debt, we will create the impression there that we are credit worthy, so we will maybe get better loan agreements and interest rates, and we will lower our debt service cost, which currently stands at 22%. 22 rands out of every 100 rand goes towards cost of debt, instead of it going to other costs. Our debt service cost line item in the budget, is the highest line item. We are paying more towards debt than we are paying for health, or that we are paying for basic education, or that we are paying for safety, on debt that should not have been that high. So it's a very good thing that we're getting this under control. Yeah. And I can promise the people out there that the Democratic Alliance will do everything in our power to keep our debt managed and to prevent it from rocketing sky high as it did in the past. Definitely.
Now, guys, I want to bring us all together into this question that I'm about to ask. What is the one thing for the person who's sitting at home trying to wrap their head around this medium-term budget? What is the one thing you want them to know from yesterday that is important? We'll start with you, Pax.
Look, I think the one key thing is to say we've turned the page so that we are focused on you in terms of growing the economy to create jobs. That's the most key thing. And just to latch on to the previous conversation is that when you are servicing debt and you're having less and less to pay with debt, but you're growing the economy on the other end to create more and more employment, you're putting more and more money in the kitty to be able to do basic services. And I think for me, the key takeaway for South Africans must know is that the DA fought to make sure that we turn the page for economic growth, to create jobs, but more so than anything is to make sure that when we do create jobs, we put more money in the kitty to put services in your home, transport, electricity, water, roads, and ultimately a better environment in terms of our infrastructure in our towns and our cities.
Mark?
There's a plan. We finally have a plan to start addressing the issues that face South Africa. I genuinely believe South Africa can be a proud and prosperous nation, but we weren't going to achieve it by following the old recipe of sticking our heads in the sand, incurring more spending without any plan to grow the economy and create opportunity. Now, for me, the main takeaway yesterday is the DA is in the room and we've got a plan.
Thank you, Mark. Avili?
Loyola, I'm becoming a grandfather early next year. And I want my children and my grandchildren to grow up in this country. And for the first time in many years, I can say with confidence to them, my children, stay here. There is a plan. We will rescue South Africa as we have promised. And I'm very sure that we are on the right track. Loyola, it will take time. Guys, it's not going to be an easy ride. Let's be honest with each other. But we are turning the ship around and we will get fair winds and fair waters sailing into the future with what we are implementing here.
I just want to say to a young person standing on the side of the road with their graduation garb saying, I'm looking for a job and I haven't found it, I want to say to them, there is hope. This is a turning, we're turning on a trajectory that is bringing hope for all South Africans.
And I want to thank each and every one of you for all the work and the fighting that you are doing for South Africans, because that is what it's all about. It's making the changes that matter. The DA's fight to rescue South Africa continues. From Cape Town to Thohoyandou, the DA is championing issues that matter to everyone. And we are using our position in Parliament and national government to get things done. A massive thank you to our panelists and to all the people watching at home. Remember, the DA is committed to fostering responsible governance that prioritizes the well-being of every South African. If you believe in the change we're advocating for and want to be part of the solution, stay engaged with us. Let's continue the conversation about how we can build the future for our nation together. My name is Luyolo Mpiti, Khadebe Mtimkulu Pungani, signing out. Together, we can shape the future we all deserve.
I am a mother. I am a father. I'm a daughter. I am a son. I believe in freedom. Freedom to earn a living. Go where I want. Love who I want. Say what I believe and pursue my dreams. I am brave. I am a provider. I believe in fairness. A fairness where our achievements are determined by our choices and hard work. I am a leader. I believe in opportunity. A nation where opportunity is plentiful and everyone's rights are protected. I believe in diversity. Every person has a unique perspective and an important role to play in building our nation. We do not judge each other by how we look, but by who we are. We are South Africans working together. We are the Democratic Alliance.
Thanks for watching. All across our beautiful country, people are joining forces to elect the new government that can rescue South Africa. Like and follow us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Please share our videos with friends and family. Let's rescue South Africa.